everyone, I'm Lauren from Menagerie of Stitches. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 7 of the 12 days of mini Christmas amigurumi. By now you probably already know what the 12 days of mini Christmas amigurumi is, but let's recap all of the ones that we've made so far. We've made a hot cocoa, a snow globe, a drum, a Christmas pudding, Christmas lights, and a Christmas tree. If you're just joining us, make sure to check out all of the previous videos for this crochet along. I'll have all of them linked in the description below. Make sure to subscribe so you can follow along each day. If you'd prefer an ad-free PDF version of these patterns, you can purchase the downloadable PDF on my website, amenagerieofstitches.com. Before I reveal the mini for day 7, let's go over the materials we'll need for today's project. You can find the full material list in the description below. I'll be using both Hobbii Rainbow Cotton 8/4 and Friends Cotton 8/4. This is a weight 1 super fine yarn. Technically these are different yarns, but they're the same weight and identical, so that's why I like to use them both within the same pattern. For Rainbow Cotton, we'll need the color Almond, which is color number 89, and for Friends Cotton, we're going to need Arctic Blue, which is color number 77, White, which is color number 1, and Mustard, color number 28. Because these projects are mini, you'll only need one skein of each color. This is a great stash busting project, so feel free to use whatever type of yarn you already have on hand. You'll also need a size B 2.25mm crochet hook, a pair of 6mm safety eyes, straight pins, a stitch marker, black embroidery floss and a needle, a yarn needle, scissors, and fiberfill stuffing. Let's reveal the mini for day 7. Today we're going to be making this adorable little angel. For this pattern, you'll need to know how to make a magic ring, as well as how to chain, single crochet, and invisible decrease. You'll also need to know how to work in the back loops only and how to work into the back bumps of a chain piece. Video tutorials for how to do these techniques can be found in the description below. Let's get started. I'm going to start by making the head, and I'll be using this color called Almond. To begin with round 1, the pattern says 6 single crochet in a magic ring. So I'm going to start by making my magic ring. And then I'm going to place 6 single crochets inside. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm going to pull this tail to close the hole, and let's move on to round 2. Round 2 of the pattern states increase in each stitch around for 12 stitches. So I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each of these stitches around until I have 12 at the end. And now I'm just going to place my stitch marker in that last stitch to mark my spot. And let's move on to round 3. Round 3 of the pattern states single crochet 1, increase 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So that means I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and in the second stitch I'm going to place an increase, so that's 2 single crochets together. So that's 1 and 2. Now I'll repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. So 1 and then an increase. That's 1 and 2. And that's going to be the end of round 3. Let's move on to round 4. Round 4 of the pattern states single crochet 2, increase 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. So I'll place 1 single crochet into the next 2 spaces, and in the following stitch I'm going to make my increase. So 2 single crochets together. And I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker again. And that's going to be the end of round 4. Now let's move on to rounds 5 through 8. The pattern says to single crochet 24. So for each of these rows, I'm going to make 1 single crochet into each of these stitches until I have 24 at the end. So I'm just going to place 1 single crochet into each of these stitches. And that's going to be the end of round 5. Now you can see that this piece is starting to curl in the opposite direction. I'm just going to correct that by pushing the inside towards me, and then you'll see that it starts to take shape in the correct way. Now for rounds 6 through 8, I'm going to repeat what we just did, and I'll meet you back here at the end. Now this is what your piece should look like after you've crocheted rounds 5 through 8. Now let's move on to round 9. Round 9 of the pattern states single crochet 2, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So that's 1 and 2. Then in the next 2 stitches, I'm going to make the invisible decrease. So insert your hook into the front loops only of the next 2 stitches and make an invisible decrease. And I'll repeat that all the way around until I get to the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 9. Now let's add our safety eyes. To add the safety eyes, we're going to place them between rounds 7 and 8, placing them 5 stitches apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to insert my crochet hook just to open that stitch up a little bit. All right, now I'm going to count 5 stitches over. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the 6th stitch, I'm going to insert my crochet hook and place the second safety eye. Now let's add the smile. If you're unsure how to do this, I do have a full video tutorial here on my channel showing how to create it. All right, now I'm just going to fasten this off with a knot. Now I can add the backs of the safety eyes. All right, now that we've added the face, let's move on to finishing the body. Now let's move on to round 10 of the pattern. It says to single crochet 1, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 12 stitches. So I'll place 1 single crochet, and then I'll make an invisible decrease in the next. And I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. And now before I finish my last stitch of this round, round 11, we're going to be starting in a new color. So I'm going to do that color change now. Before I yarn over and complete this stitch, let's bring in the Arctic blue yarn, and I'll just lay it over top of the crochet hook and pull it through to complete the stitch. And then just give the almond color a nice little tug and it'll tighten that stitch up for you. Now let's add fiber fill to the head. You can just open this up a little bit with your crochet hook. And I like to use a chopstick in order to help me stuff the top of the head. Now you want to stuff this all the way because we'll be making the body next and we won't be able to add any more fiber fill. It's just easier to have it all added at once. Now before I continue on with round 11, I'm going to fasten off this almond colored yarn. Then I'm going to tie a knot where these 2 strands are so that it secures the color change. And then you can trim this tail down, you don't need that long. So I usually just go about a 1/2 inch or so. Now let's move on to round 11. The pattern says to single crochet 1, increase 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So I'll start by placing 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then I'll increase in the following stitch. These little tails kind of get in the way. Just hold them down. And now I'm going to be finished with round 11. So I'm going to place my stitch marker back into that last stitch. And now let's move on to round 12. The pattern says to single crochet 5, increase for a total of 3 times for 21 stitches. So I'll place 1 single crochet into the next 5 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I'll place an increase in the next stitch. So 1, 2, and I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 12. Now let's move on to round 13 of the pattern. It says to single crochet 21. So I'm just going to place one single crochet into each of these 21 stitches. And that's going to be the end of round 13. Let's move on to round 14. The pattern says to single crochet 6, increase 3 times for a total of 24 stitches. So I'm going to place one single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I'm going to place an increase in the next stitch. 1, 2, and I'll repeat that all the way until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 14. Moving on to rounds 15 and 16, the pattern says to single crochet 24. That just means I'm going to place one single crochet into each of these 24 stitches for those 2 rounds. And this is going to be the end of round 16. Let's move on to round 17. The pattern says to single crochet 7, increase 3 times for a total of 27 stitches. So I'm going to place one single crochet into the first 7 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In the following stitch, I'm going to make an increase. 1, 2, and I'll repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 17. Now let's move on to rounds 18 and 19. The pattern says to single crochet 27. So for these 2 rows, I'm just going to single crochet 1 into each of the 27 stitches. And that's going to be the end of round 18 and 19. Now let's move on to round 20. The pattern says single crochet 7, invisible decrease 3 times for a total of 24 stitches. So I'll place a single crochet into the first 7 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then in the next 2 stitches, I'm going to make an invisible decrease. And I'll repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 20. Now we're going to add fiber fill to the body, and we'll add more as we continue to close the piece. Start with just a little bit, so that way when you get to the neck part where the body and the head meet right there, that it's stuffed enough right in that area. All right, and now I'm going to stop here and I'll add more once we start to close the piece. Moving on to round 21 of the pattern, it says in back loops only, single crochet 2, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So I'm going to place a single crochet into the first 2 back loops. So that's 1 and 2. Then I'm going to make an invisible decrease, so into the back loops only. Make an invisible decrease, and then I'm going to repeat that until I hit the stitch marker. So single crochet 1, 2, then make an invisible decrease. And I'll repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. All right, and that's going to be the end of round 21. At this point, I'm going to add a little bit more fiber fill. All right, now let's move on to round 22. Round 22 of the pattern states single crochet 1, invisible decrease 6 times for a total of 12 stitches. So I'm going to place 1 single crochet in the first stitch, then I'm going to make an invisible decrease. And I'll repeat that all the way around until I hit the stitch marker. And that's going to be the end of round 22. Now let's move on to round 23. The pattern says invisible decrease around 6 times for a total of 6 stitches. So I'm going to place an invisible decrease in each of these stitches around, 2, and if you need to, you can pause here and add any more fiber fill that you need, but I'm happy with how stuffed this is. So that's going to be 3, 4, 5, and this last one will be number 6. All right, now let's fasten this off. I'm just going to trim a tail, and with my crochet hook, I'm just going to pull this loop all the way through, just like so. You can give it a little tug, and now we need to close this hole. With my yarn needle, I'm going to insert it into the front loop only of the first stitch, coming from the inside to the outside. And I'll pull that through. And we'll do this for all 6 of our stitches. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now I'm going to place my thumb at the base here, and I'm just going to give this a little pull, and you can see the hole has closed. Now I'm going to insert my needle back into the hole and come out one of the stitch holes on the side, like so. Then I'm going to pull this through and give it a little tug, and it'll close the piece up. Now let's secure this tail with a little knot, and I'm going to trim just a tiny little tail on there. And with a smaller crochet hook, I'm just going to pull this tail inside. And that is going to be the finished body. Now let's move on to the halo. I'm going to be using this mustard colored yarn. To begin with round 1, the pattern states 18 single crochets in a magic ring. So I'm going to make my magic ring here. Then I'm going to place 18 single crochets inside. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now I'm going to just pull our starting tail just a little bit to close up that whole sum. All right, and now I'm going to fasten this off, and I'm going to leave a tail for sewing. Then I'm going to pull this loop all the way through, and let's do an invisible fasten off now. So with my yarn needle, I'm going to insert it into the very first single crochet underneath both of the loops and pull it through. And then I'm going to go into the back loop only of the last stitch and pull that through. And it's just going to make a little clean invisible fasten off. Now I'm going to weave in this smaller tail because this is going to be the tail that we use for sewing. So to weave it in, I'm just going to go through the back stitches here on the back side. And pull that through. And then I'm just going to give that a nice trim really close to the edge, and that's going to be the halo. Now let's attach it. To sew the halo onto the head, we're going to be placing it between rounds 3 and 4, and I do like to use straight pins in order to help me place where I want it to go. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to be the rows that it needs to go into, and then I'm just going to place the halo in that area and then pin it into place. So it should look something like this from the front. We are only going to be stitching these back stitches right here, so there's only going to be 4 stitches that we work into, and we'll leave the rest of it unsewn so that it sticks up like this. So now with my yarn needle, I'm going to insert into the head, and then you're going to come out one of the stitch holes on the side and pull that through. Then you're going to go back into that same stitch hole, and you're going to come up underneath one of the stitches from the magic ring, and you're going to pull that through. You can remove this straight pin now, and then just pull that through. And now we're going to go into the next stitch over here on the halo, insert it into the head and then out through a stitch hole, pull through. So you should have a little line there where we're sewing. Now we're going to insert it back into that stitch hole, come out next to the straight pin. You can remove the straight pin now, and then I'm just going to pull this through. Then I'm going to go back over and insert the needle into the other side over here. Go through a stitch hole on the side of the head and pull it through. And so basically we're just securing this down. So you can sew up here more if you want to on the sides, but I like to make it so that it sticks off pretty decently. I'm just going to do this once more. And then I'm going to pull it out through the head. And that is going to be how I'm going to sew it on there. Now I'm going to secure this with a knot. I'll trim the end. And then with a smaller crochet hook, I'm just going to grab that knot and hide it inside. And that is going to be the finished halo. Now let's move on to the wings. Now for the wings, I'm going to be using this white yarn. To start with round 1, the pattern says we're going to leave a tail about 10 inches for sewing. So you're going to want to leave a length enough that you'll be able to sew this wing to the body later. And then I'm going to make a slip knot because we're going to be chaining 6. So the pattern says chain 6, then turn the chain over and working into the back bumps, single crochet across for 5 stitches. Then we'll chain 1 and turn. So that's going to look like this. We're going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we're going to turn the chain over and we're going to work into those back bumps. So you should have it looking like this. That's going to be our first bump. So that's 1 single crochet. Oops. 2, 3, 4, and 5 in this last stitch. There we go. Now we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn the piece. So I like to just flip it over. Now we're going to work back into those stitches we just created. Rounds 2 and 3 say to single crochet 5, chain 1 and turn after each row. So for round 2, we're going to single crochet across. So that's 5 stitches. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to chain 1, we're going to turn it, and we're going to do the same exact thing for round 3. So single crochet in each of these stitches across, and then we'll chain 1 and we'll turn. Now let's move on to round 4. Round 4 says skip 2 stitches, then single crochet 3, chain 1 and turn. So we're going to skip the first 2 stitches, not the chain 1, so we'll skip this first one, the second one, and we'll work into this middle stitch here. And we're going to single crochet 3 across. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our piece. Now for rounds 5 and 6, we're going to single crochet 3, chain 1 and turn after each row. So you'll just single crochet 1 into each of those 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to chain 1, turn, single crochet 3 across. So 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to chain 1 and turn. Now for round 7, the pattern says to single crochet 2, skip the last stitch, chain 1 and turn. So we're going to single crochet 1, single crochet 2, then we're going to skip that last stitch and we're just going to chain 1 and turn. Now for round 8, the pattern says to skip 1 stitch, single crochet. So we're going to skip the first stitch, not the chain, it's just the first stitch, and we'll go into the second one and make a single crochet. Now we're going to fasten off and weave in the tail. So I'm just going to trim this, and then with my crochet hook, just pull that tail all the way through. Now we're going to weave in this tail. So with my yarn needle, I'm just going to weave this tail through the stitches on here. So you'll just pick up some of the stitches and work the needle into them. All right, then just pull this through. And now I'm going to trim that as close as I can. And that's going to be our finished wing. Now let's make one more. Now these are going to be our 2 wings. Let's attach them to the body. Using straight pins, we're going to pin the wings to the back of the angel, and we're going to leave a couple of stitches between each of the wings. So just place it like this. And then for the second wing, I'm just going to space them out about 2 stitches apart. And then when I flip it over to the front, I'm just going to make sure that this is where I want them placed and that they're evenly sticking out on the sides. All right, now to sew them into place with my yarn needle, I'm going to insert the needle into the body, and I'm going to come out one of the stitch holes on the side here and pull that through. Now I'm going to be working into the bumps that are along here. So when I insert my needle back into that stitch hole, I'm going to come up on underneath one of those stitches right there. Then I'm going to pull this through. Now I'm going to work back over to the right side, and you can come out one of the stitch holes on the side and pull that through. Now I'm going to reinsert back into that stitch hole, and I'm going to come up on the other side of the loop. So just like that, pull that through. Now I'm going to insert back over to the right into this area right here. Insert it into a stitch hole and then pull through. Insert back into that same stitch hole. And at this point, you can remove this last straight pin Then you're going to come up under the next set of stitches that we just did, pull that through, go back over to the right, insert the needle into a stitch hole and pull through, insert it back into that same stitch hole, and then I like to come up on the outside of the wing. I'm going to pull that through, and then I'm going to go back to the right side to go into the wing again. Pull this through one of the stitch holes, and that's how you're going to stitch the wings into place. So when you turn it over, you won't have a lot of messy stitches right here. We're just going to be going through the line here. Now I'm going to secure this with a knot. Trim the end. And with a smaller crochet hook, I'm just going to pull that tail through. All right, now let's just do that for the other side. And this is our finished angel. You can easily change the colors of this one for the skin and for the robe. Don't forget you can also add a hook or a string to turn this into an ornament. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a like and leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the rest of the 12 days of mini Christmas amigurumi. Tomorrow I'll be back with another wintry themed mini. Happy crocheting, friends!